Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Steve Olson with the Fourplex Investment Group based out of Provo, Utah here, and we're happy to have you join us on this webinar where we talk a little bit about one of FIG's projects that we've just started opening up for reservations. It's called Pineridge Farms, and it's in Payson, Utah. And we love it when we can get more dirt, more land, more apartments to develop in the state of Utah because it's been so good to us and it's home base here. It really is where we operate. In fact, this project's about 12 minutes from the front door of our office. We're excited to have it, and we're excited for you to join us. And I know many of you have spoken to us before. Many of you have been following us via emails and various campaigns we've done on Facebook and whatever. So if this is the first time that you've joined us on a FIG webinar, welcome. If you've talked to us already before, some of this will be a light review, but really what it's intended to do is, number one, give you an introduction into who we are, what our mission is, what we're doing, who are these people behind the scenes. Number two, we're going to give you a good look at inside of Utah County and Payson specifically. And number three, let's drill down into the actual development, the actual subdivision, and what you could potentially be investing in with FIG. And then we'll just kind of let you know what to do next if it's something that you're curious to hear more about. As always, we got to do this, right? It's too many lawyers today. And if you're a lawyer, you're probably the least offended by that. You're used to me bagging on lawyers on these webinars. So FIG, we're not a company, we're a marketing platform, and we're comprised of a few different companies, all with common ownership. And we'll discuss that momentarily. The information that I tell you about today, you should take steps to independently verify it. This is stuff that we cannot guarantee. It's subject to the open market out there. So we'll give you what we think. Please verify it to the best way that you can. Get with your tax advisors, attorneys, and any other relevant professionals to verify it as well. That's a good place to start. We're going to record it. In fact, we already are. So we will send you a copy of this recording automatically. And the reason I bring that up is we've got a lot of slides, lots of data and information coming at you today. You don't need to copy it down furiously. You will have access to it later. So here we go. Let's talk about Pineridge Farms in Payson, Utah. But first, we can drill into who is FIG? Who's the FIG team? I know everybody always asks questions about that. And it starts with us, the people that you're going to meet today. Well, maybe today. We'll see if you meet all of us. I'm Steve. I'm the director of sales here at FIG, and I run point on all things investor related here. Specifically, I carry licensing in a couple of other states, and I've got to get a few more. Too many real estate licenses, but you got to do it. So if you've been working on anything with us in the state of Texas or Utah, you've probably heard from me, and I have a host of my own clients that have invested with FIG in Idaho. Chase is here. He's going to join us in a few minutes, and he works specifically on Utah and Idaho, and so does Sherida, and she's actually our first licensee in Arizona, which we'll probably do a webinar on that one in a few weeks because it'll be our first foray into that market, which we're excited about. But we won't be the only people that you interact with along the way. On the construction side of it, you've got three key players, Mike Miller being the first one. He's one of the original founders of FIG and one of the principals of the company. Been in business in construction and development for a long, long time. And we like to credit him. He's the one that dreamed up this idea of building townhouses or condos, but platting them as fourplexes, of getting outside of that normal fourplex stigma of the two up, two down, kind of rundown part of town, right? That's what most fourplexes are. That's what you think about when you think about fourplexes. So he had a great idea, and we have run with it like crazy ever since then. And Jacob Erickson is the one that does the real actual work. Mike would agree with me on that, but Jacob is dealing with all the subcontractors and budgets and actually building these things and going through that process. He's built a lot of doors with us and a lot with other builders in the past and has a great level of experience. You can wind Jacob up and he'll talk about building code until the cows come home. He knows a lot about it. And Brian Schnell is our director of operations. He really ties all this together because he has extensive experience with multifamily builders in the Northwestern United States and ties all this together to help operate all sides of the company. So you'll hear from him when you invest with FIG towards the end of the process. He kind of helps put a bow on it for us. None of this really has any point without a property manager, though. Corey Bonner runs Max Property Management. They are the in-house manager for FIG. They're technically a separate entity. We'd be crazy not to run it that way, but they're located here in the office with us. If my door was open, I could see right down into their offices. And so he's helping spearhead hiring and keeping all of the moving parts functioning on the property management side, because if that side is taking care of itself, all these other things really come together nicely. But that's not the only side of it too. If you've worked with us in the past, you know Lane Aldrich at First Colony Mortgage. He is FIG's preferred lender and takes steps to really prepare your loan packages if you're going to use financing on the front end, and get that into the appropriate construction lender. You can't just go walk into Wells Fargo and say, I want a new construction fourplex. They're not going to do it. They're going to look at you like you're crazy, right? So Lane is the one that can build these relationships with the local banks that are actually willing to use that kind of financing product, and in the end, do your final refinance for you. You're not obligated to use Lane, but you'd be crazy not to. We all feel very strongly about that. In fact, I'm finishing a refinance myself. We always say we eat our own cooking here. We all own these units too. And Lane's just about to finish up a refinance for me in the state of Texas. So this is not our first rodeo. This is just a mix. And I know we've got investors on the call today that have properties in some of these developments, but you see in the top right, I won't spend a lot of time here, but Steeplechase is the very first project that we ever did back in I think it was 2011. So far back in real estate years, I don't even have a picture of it. Guys, we got to get a picture of Steeplechase. We got the old rendering there. And then we kept expanding. You see, we've got Idaho on here, Texas on here, a variety of other projects. This isn't everything, right? There's a lot more that we've built and developed among this, but this is to show you kind of the variety that comes through investing in the FIG channel. So what we're going to do now that you have kind of a 10,000 foot view on how we operate. Chase, you're probably going to want to unmute yourself now because you're almost up to bat. I use up to bat because Chase likes baseball. If I say it another way, he doesn't know what I'm talking about. So he's going to give us a little insight into our great home state of Utah here. You see a beautiful shot of, that's got to be Zion National Park or somewhere down there. But Chase, take it away and tell us what's going on in Utah specifically, and we'll drill down a little bit into Utah County too with you and Sherida. What do you think? Why should investors care about investing here?
Yeah, Steve, thanks for giving me a minute here. As you can see in front of you there, we're looking at a couple of different colors. Up there in orange is going to be the Utah section. I'll talk about that for a little bit, and then down below that's Utah County. And when people think of Utah and when it comes to real estate, there's a lot of excitement because there's been a ton of growth here, especially over the last 5 to 10 years. It's been a very hot market, and we like to talk about not only Utah, but we like to narrow down on Utah County, and that's where we're at, and that's where this project is currently at, and we're going to be talking about a little bit later on further. Without driving you guys too much crazy about going over these numbers, there's a couple of key numbers I do want to point out. You can see the population growth there of 16% for the state of Utah, but if you look below that there, you also see 177% for growth for Utah County. So that's telling us there that Utah County is one of the main counties in Utah where we're going to see a lot of growth within the state. We'll see some down in St. George, southern Utah, but really there's a lot of great land available here in Utah County, and we're going to see that should be over the next 10 to 20 years. And where that's going to happen, it's going to move out towards west, towards Eagle Mountain and Saratoga Springs, or it's going to go down south towards Payson, which we're going to talk about a little bit further in the presentation. The median age, we're very young, which is awesome to see. That just means that we have a very young and vibrant economy, and that's contributing to the growth that we're seeing here. The next one there that I want to point out is the median household income is around $75,000. It's very affordable to be able to live within this market here if you want to purchase, or even if you want to rent a property too, and we're going to get into those numbers a little bit later on. Number of employees, very strong employment within Utah County, and I want to point those numbers out because I think they're very important, especially that percentage of 5.3. If you were to look into the national employment growth rate, it's at a little over 1%, so 1.2. And if you look at different markets to invest in, if you're seeing a 2% or higher, that's good. And if you're seeing 3%, that's really good, or even 4%. So to be above that 5% for employment growth is really unheard of. And if you've been looking at real estate or different markets, you're going to know what I'm talking about as you dive into the numbers a little bit further. So keep that in mind as we discuss numbers or talk about Utah County a little bit more. But that was something I wanted to point out.
Can I add something there, Chase?
Oh, please. Yeah, go ahead.
I really think the observation that you've made about going west and going south is true. I mostly grew up in Utah County in Orem, which is right next to Provo. And when I was a little kid, I remember we had cousins that lived in Sandy, Utah. Now, Sandy's like 30 minutes or so north of Orem along I-15. And when we would leave our house to go down Center Street and get on I-15, within about 5 minutes north of I-15, you were in like farmland. There was nothing going on, especially as you looked west. There was nothing happening. And even in South Salt Lake County, that's where the prison is, right? There's nothing going on. And now when we look at that, any of you that have come to visit us here, that's all filled in, right? And so now there literally is no choice but to go south and west. And when you have a growing population, and look at that median age, right? Utah County is the youngest county in the youngest state. It means people are, they're making babies, we're having families, we need housing. So I just wanted to add that observation too.
Very true. Yes, thanks for chiming in there. And then this next slide here is pretty awesome. It's just the rankings, and it shows us how highly ranked Utah is across the board, whether we're talking about just the economy, employment, healthcare, or even education. We're going to be in the top 10 over a lot of these rankings, which is pretty awesome to see. With employment, I want to dive into that just a little bit further because it's really important. We have something here in Lehi, which is called the Silicon Slopes. And if you're from here, you're going to know what that means. And I think a lot of people out of state probably knows what that means by now. There's been a lot of growth, especially along the I-15 corridor, anywhere between Provo up to South Salt Lake City, and this is where a lot of these major tech jobs are coming in. And it's been huge for the growth within the area because it provides great jobs and employment for those that want to live here, have good cost of living, and also have a great job at the same time. Some of those companies that you're going to hear about, if you haven't already, are like Vivint, Qualtrics, Inside Sales, and the list goes on. And that's anywhere between Lehi, Provo, all the way up the I-15 corridor. And you might hear something called the Wasatch Front. Those are the Wasatch Mountains that run anywhere from Ogden down to Provo or even Spanish Fork and even into Payson. That's the Wasatch Front. And so when you hear that, or if you hear the Silicon Slopes, then now you know what we're talking about there.
Yeah, that's good. We'll talk a little bit more about the I-15 corridor in a minute and what that means and why it's important.
The one thing that I'll touch on, if I didn't in the last slide, I'll touch on it here because it's going to be the same thing, is the high quality of education. There's 3 major universities: Brigham Young University, Utah Valley, and then University of Utah. We have 2 of those universities really close by our project, not too far away. We're talking about a 15 to 20 minute commute, which isn't that bad at all, especially if you're talking with someone that's familiar with that California commute. So if someone wants to live a little bit further south and get lower rents and be able to commute to school or some of those tech jobs that I was telling you about, they're really not that far away. And the education there is just really taken off, especially BYU and UVU. UVU is now past BYU with the number of students at 37,000, and they're expected to be, I think, close to 50,000 in the next couple of years. So the education system and the schools are growing. We've talked about the new employers. Improved transportation. It's kind of a headache right now, especially in Lehi, Silicon Slopes,
Yeah.
like I told you about. You know what I'm talking about.
I live there. Yeah, it's a pain.
All 3 of us live in Lehi or in that area, and they're improving the I-15 and a lot of the roads there, which will be nice at some point in the next couple of years. They're expanding and making that wider. just because Utah, specifically Utah County, is growing so fast.
Yeah.
And the other thing I'll add there too is you got the airport that's not too far away in Salt Lake, and there's also an airport in Provo that flies to quite a few close destinations if you need to get somewhere fast.
Yeah, I read an op-ed kind of along lines of education. You hit on the higher education, and I remember years ago, Utah Valley University was actually just a local community college, and hardly anybody went there. And now it's a university with enrollment of 30,000 plus, which is crazy, which is just evident when you go past that exit off I-15. It's a madhouse. It's busy. There's a lot of people, a lot of transacting of business happening. And so that's been great. But the op-ed I read, I think it was the Wall Street Journal. We'll probably have Preston see if he can hunt it down. But no state gets more money out of its public education dollars than Utah. Meaning for every dollar that we spend on a student in the public, K through 12 education, nobody gets better test results. So the state has been very efficient with what it's been spending there and just getting a lot out of that. So what do you think, Chase? You want to go on to the next one here? Everybody, by the way, I'm controlling the slides. So Chase is kind of at my
keep going
mercy.
through there. The apartment rental rate, I'm trying to think of the thing that we wanted to point out here is just the growth that we've had over the last 10 years. You can see those percentages there of 83%. And specifically here in Utah County, that's what it's increased to. It's really rose quite a bit. And so there's just been a lot of growth. And so that's the whole purpose of this slide here, is just to point out the staggering numbers that we've seen in Utah County when it comes to rental rates. It talks about the rate of growth is even stronger in Utah County, and it increased 59% with an average annual growth rate of 6%.
Yeah, bottom line is Salt Lake County has had staggering numbers, but Utah County has been even better in that case. And we, by the way, for the record, we develop in both counties and they're both awesome, but Utah County clearly has been just an excellent investment for our clients.
And the last thing that I'll touch on real quick is the rate or the average rent for an apartment in Salt Lake County. I know we've been bouncing back and forth between counties, and just if you don't know, Salt Lake County is just north of Utah County. They're pretty much connected and very close to each other. And the average rent is a little over $1,200, and that's expected to happen this year. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing a lot of our rental units. We have two different product types that we'll get into a little bit later. We have the stacked multi-units, which is going to be more the apartment fill. And so it's good to know that number. And then we have the side-by-side, which is more of the townhome fill. And we're actually getting probably about, what would you say, $100 to $200, maybe $300 more per unit per month than what that apartment average is for Salt Lake County. So it's good to understand where the rents are at. And we'll talk those a little bit deeper with this project as we go further in the presentation.
Okay, great. Tell us, just to kind of give us your quick version of what's happening job growth wise, because in my mind, like trying to put myself in the shoes of an investor, which I am, but I'd be thinking, why do you need to keep building, right? Why would we want to do that? And to me, it's, well, jobs. If there's more jobs, there's more people. So tell us a little bit about that.
Exactly. This slide is very important because you can see how many new jobs are going to be added to Utah County, and that's projected from now until about 2050. So over the next 20 to 30 years, over 500,000 new jobs. That's a lot of new jobs. And so every 1 in every 3 jobs are going to be created there in Utah County. And that's why I talked about it earlier about the Silken Slopes and how important that is.
Excellent. Let's go to the next one then. So what we're doing here, Chase, you can put your feet up on your desk, take 5 for a minute. So we've hit on Utah County, but we have some other interesting stats that we want to look at with Sherida here. So Sherida, in addition to the overall state, which consistently is in like the top 3, what about the county itself and that population growth that I had alluded to?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you look at Utah County, by 2065, 28% of the state's population will be in Utah County, which is pretty amazing when you think of that number. One thing I also wanted to touch on is the fact that one of the largest contributors to our population is obviously natural growth. As Chase mentioned, we're a really young state with young families. And then right behind it is the net in-migration. So there's just a few things, in regards to our population growth.
Yeah, and that's all those statistics are from the Kem Gardner Institute at the University of Utah. He's a demographer. We're not making that stuff up. That's all publicly available information that you can verify if you choose to. So tell us a little bit about Payson itself within Utah County and kind of what that means. Is this in the boonies? Why would anyone want to live there?
Yeah, great thing. Okay, so really quick, if you look at this map, you're going to see that highlighted in red is the city of Payson itself. We have a little pointer right there that just kind of points out some different destinations on here. So we felt that some of these destinations were things that people would be curious about, want to know drive times. Like Steve said, hey, are we in the boonies or how close are we to things? So obviously, like Steve had mentioned, we're right off of I-15. Took them a minute or two to get to the freeway from the project. Closest city right north of it's going to be Spanish Fork, and then to Provo, about an 8.6 mile drive, kind of BYU area. I know Steve had mentioned, he jumped in his car, left this project, and it took him from project to our office in downtown Provo, took him 12 minutes. So Provo and Orem, there's going to be a lot of stuff going on in there. And Chase had made mention of Silicon Slope. So you're 30 minutes away from kind of the south end of that, which is located in Lehi. And then we put in here downtown Salt Lake. Now we get that there's a lot in between, here in downtown Salt Lake, but just to kind of give somebody an idea, if they were working downtown, it's a 58-mile drive. So good.
My opinion is somebody that works downtown, they're not going to live in Payson. They're going to work somewhere in Utah County or maybe South Salt Lake County, but you wouldn't live in Payson if you work in downtown Salt Lake. Do you agree?
Absolutely. I think one of those things, the reason I like to point it out is because some people like to go to events in downtown Salt Lake. So people are like, hey, if I'm going to go to where a lot of events are, where are those events? Or to get to the airport.
Yeah.
Downtown Salt Lake.
Sure. But your day-to-day life, most of that's going to be in the core of Utah County if you live in Payson, which we can kind of see what that means here. Tell us about, let's get hyper local, kind of sticking to southern Utah County in the Provo-Orem area and what kind of amenities and such that tenants would have access to it. And just point out where the project is on the map there, if you would.
Yep, absolutely. So if you can see that purple highlighted area, and then you see our FIG logo right to the side of it, that's actually where our project is, where Pineridge Farms is located. And then you can see all of these other, employers or, Costco, whatnot. You see a lot of these brand names that are out here. So they're in close proximity to a lot of things that you and I use in our day-to-day lives. So I don't know. I think these are some great things. You got the hospital over to the right. Like I said, Costco, BYU, Utah Valley University's on there as well. So
yeah.
In the middle of stuff, and stuff is still growing, as you can kind of see on that map. There's still some farmland and whatnot.
Bottom line is tenant can get in their car and go to the mall, go to university, go to the hospital, go shop, whatever they need to do.
Yep, or they can Uber Eats McDonald's to them really quick.
Yes. Why would they do McDonald's though? I mean, look
at that.
I
just saw it on the map. Maybe Subway.
Yeah, look at that fine Payson cuisine, McDonald's and Subway.
Yeah.
It's out of this world. Luckily, they can go 5 miles up the road and have some different options.
Yeah.
All right. So, hey, that's a good segue when we talk about going up and down the road. Tell us what we're in for public transit wise and what's kind of expanding into southern Utah County.
Yeah, this hasn't been a huge thing in Utah. A lot of people don't think or don't use public transportation or haven't in the past, and this is becoming, more of a thing of people want public transportation. So we have what's called Front Runner. They're actually putting a stop right out in front of our project. So we're super excited about that because that is a key contributor to people wanting to, being location-wise. They want to be close to this public mass transit. So we've got a Trax Front Runner station right out in front of the project. And then off to the right, you see that picture of the bus. We have UTA, Utah Transit Authority, that have routes that kind of take people from, down south, up north, whatnot. So there's options there for people as people are worried about, commuting. And I know a lot of people commute just so that they cut time off, they can work on the train or whatnot. So
Utah County is changing. It's more density is coming in as you go up and down the I-15 corridor. in Utah County. Now you're seeing these new front runner stops. You see a picture of front runner on the left there. That's the Provo station. And it's a big double decker, light rail. And it goes, it's called front runner because we're on the Wasatch Front. And the vision of UTA, the Utah Transit Authority, is that front runner will be operating from the very bottom of Utah County, which you're getting close to it with Payson, and go all the way up to Box Elder County. So you're going to be front running, right? Going up and down the Wasatch Front. And anytime you're on I-15, you can see these front runner stops at these various cities. And what happens around those stops? Apartments, retail, tons and tons going on because we're changing, we're urbanizing. We're becoming a state where, not everybody can afford, nor does everybody want the quarter-acre lot with the big house. We're just having to adapt to density with how many jobs are coming in here.
Yeah.
So tell a little bit more about what's going on, then we're going to get into the specifics and the numbers, which is probably what everybody's wanting us to do anyway.
Yeah, so we just want to put this in here. Obviously, Utah, we have 4 seasons, just kind of show you, obviously, snow, you can go skiing right now. Skiing's great. I know a few of us have hit the slopes lately, but golf, parks, whatnot.
Yep.
Just kind of give you an overview.
It's known for the outdoor. We have beautiful, beautiful outdoors. Here's the irony. I have a Nordic track treadmill where you can do these runs, and there's a big TV on it. And so they take you for a run. And I went for a run in Utah today, in my basement in Utah, but it was kind of nice. Beautiful. Okay, so let's get into the specifics here. Will you tell us a little bit about what this project's going to look like on a high level number?
Yep. So we have a total of 96 doors in this project. They're all going to be fourplexes, and they're all 4 stories high. So we're doing a stacked fourplex, the Miller floor plan. I'll jump into that in a few slides later, but just wanted to kind of give you an idea of that. We went through, Chase and I, and counted all these parking stalls. So there's plenty of parking, and then 49 garages. These will be held by the developer and monetized. So this is something that your tenants can take advantage of, but they're not being sold individually. These units will all be 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, which is an awesome mix of, for those, the project just Eversage that Steve had mentioned, they have 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms. We kind of wanted something a little different, so we went with just all 2 bedrooms. The HOA on this, $185 a month per door. Base pricing on this project is $709. One thing that we did include that I'm super excited about is the LVT flooring, the stainless steel appliances, the blinds, and then all of them include balconies. I know when we were talking a little earlier as a sales team, we were mentioning, why we like some of these upgrades. So for example, the LVT flooring, this is one that, normal vinyl that we've been putting in the units before, LVT has always been an upgrade. So now we're including this one, but if a tenant happens to drag a chair across the kitchen floor and tear it, they have to replace the entire vinyl floor. Where with the LVT, they can cut it out, it's in planks, and they can replace that plank. So a lot more durable, easier to repair and maintain. So that's one thing that we are super excited about. And then also
that's scheduled to go in by the way, everywhere in the units except for the bedrooms. The bedrooms would be carpeted, but your high traffic areas, hallways, kitchen, etc., will have that LVT. The idea is that it's going to just limit your maintenance down the road.
Yeah, exactly. So then on this next slide we've got going is the plat map of Pineridge Farms, just kind of give you an idea. So we have
our crooked plat map.
Yeah, don't mind that. But you can see we have plenty of parking down on the right-hand side. You can see the ones that are kind of boxed off. Those are where the garages are going to be, but there's plenty of parking for each of the tenants.
Yeah, little clubhouse there in the middle. So typically the HOA/management will have a place to kind of land and coordinate their showings from. Usually put like a small gym or something like that in there. So you can see this mostly goes in a straight line. This project does along the 15 there.
Yeah, okay. Exactly. Okay, so this next slide, we are kind of showing you what the floor plan looks like. So like I mentioned before, you're going to be stacked. So this is just kind of one level, let's just say this is the main level, just for fun. You're going 4 high, so you would own a 4th of this. 2 bedrooms. One of the bedrooms, the master bedroom, you're going to have the walk-in bathroom and the walk-in closet with the bathroom. And then the other bathroom is going to be in the hallway so that bedroom 2 can use that, or your guests. Still have laundry closets, whatnot. So great little setup. You can kind of see we mocked up some furniture and whatnot in there. So great floor plan. We're super excited for it. On that next slide, we have some renderings. We're loving the fact that we have balconies on here. Us as sales team kind of went to the builder and said, hey, can we throw some balconies on here? We want to make these exteriors look amazing. And we feel like the balcony was the thing that was missing. And I love it. So everyone wants some fresh air and walk out onto that balcony. I know you can open a window, but it's also nice to kind of walk out and have a little space. So
Okay.
kind of what they look like.
Great. We'll keep going here. And we did have a question come in through the chat. Dan, how are you, by the way? We'll hit your question at the end here. So yeah, we're aware of that. Just want to let you know. So you can see here, and since I'm already jabbering shared, this is a rendering, color rendering of the Miller floor plan building. So you can see that stairwell in the middle, right? Each on the right side of that stairwell is a fourplex. On the left side is a fourplex, and it's just vertical. The bottom floor is unit 1. The second floor is unit 2. We rolled this out, I think, back in early December, and then we kind of pulled it back because when we got looking at those renderings, we thought, let's get some balconies on there. We really think that that's going to be valuable to the tenants and that they're going to like those. So we're excited about that floor plan. Good, clean looking, kind of a craftsman style vibe to it. And that's what those will look like. I think we had me talking about this one, didn't we, Sherida? This is my turn.
Yep, you're up.
All right. That sounds good. Everybody's like, oh no, he's back again. So what you're looking at is a purchase price on these fourplexes of $709,000. And that's inclusive of the upgrades that Sherida was talking about just a few minutes ago. We love that price. We know you cannot get a new construction fourplex in Utah County for $709,000. Not going to happen. We know, we look at the market every single day here. And if you find something for a lower cost, it's typically lower rents, lots of deferred maintenance. You can kind of see how some of those numbers pencil out with your down payment. The construction lenders require a 25% down payment as usual on everything that we do. Your buying costs were estimated to be $30,000. Some of you are well acquainted with this already, others are not. What we're trying to do is give you an idea for your closing costs and the costs associated with servicing your construction loan. That can be a little bit of a moving target, but we feel relatively confident on $30,000 for this one. Just know that my guess is probably 18 or 19,000 of that 30 is 1 year's worth of prepaid interest on your construction loan. So that's just going to go into a reserve account at the bank. And as our builder draws on your loan every month and builds the fourplex, the corresponding amount of interest is debited out of your interest reserve account. Something we've really been beating the drum on for the last 6 months, and I'm sure some of our past investors are saying it's about time, guys, right? Is this initial improvements line item. We call it initial improvements because frankly, that's the only thing that our Proforma software lets us call it. In reality, it should be called stabilization costs. So $15,000 coupled with a couple of other techniques that we can use represents 6 full months of fixed costs on your fourplex without receiving any rental income. In layman's terms, you can pay your mortgage, your HOA, your taxes, and your insurance for 6 months with that figure. And the idea is you're not going to have to pay it necessarily, but we're saying, hey, keep some powder dry to get you through that initial lease up period, because that's going to be more representative of ultimately what this would look like. I got to move some boxes on my desktop so I can see my numbers. Over on the right side, you can follow that through. I'm not going to dwell on it too much other than down where it says interest rate. So the interest rate is at 5%. Couple things I want to point out. This might be a review for some of you, but it's worth pointing it out to others. Number one, that might not be the interest rate that you get. But we're saying that we think that it could be that by the time you do your final refinance on these properties. Remember, they're starting construction in March through May. So they're going to come online with you refinancing in March through May of next year, right? And so the interest rate could be different then, right? We got a lot going on right now. Okay. So we're saying though right now, and I know this because I'm refinancing a property myself, my rate is going to be like 4.375, I think. I can't remember. Your rates are in the low to mid fours right now. So we're trying to bake some uncertainty into the cake. Most investors, and I myself included, are of the philosophy that with elections and some of the geopolitical stuff going on, we don't see a reason why those would would skyrocket. So 5% is kind of being conservative. We're trying to be safe there. Your numbers might look a little bit better than this if the rates stay where they are today or even drop. But we don't have that crystal ball. So you can see some of your financials here. We're running a vacancy rate projection of 5% once stabilized. We used to be able to get away with 3%, but what has happened is, we're not the only ones building anymore, and that's okay. It's probably a more healthy, sane market that way, but a stabilized vacancy rate of 5. We're going to have our tech and amenity package on this, and I'll show you kind of how that's handled in the industry in just a minute. But the tenants will have access to some light amenities, nothing crazy in this project, but also these are going to be smart home units. So by smart home, that means it will have a smart lock, an alarm panel, a Nest thermostat, and a doorbell cam. We also baked some pet fees in there of $50, knowing that, hey, it's probably likely that one of the tenants is going to have a pet. So you can look at your income projections here and your net performance based on a purchase. All of that is meaningless without your expenses though, right? So we've got our expenses here penciling out. This is all on our Proformas, so you can go double check this and kind of see what our operational expenses are. I'm not going to spend the time on there other than just know, if you're coming at this from a traditional view of rental property investing, like maybe you've been buying single family homes or not in managed communities, some of these numbers are going to look too high and some of them are going to look too low. For example, you're saying, how could you possibly maintain that fourplex for $50 a month? How could you insure it for $50 a month? That's ridiculous. Oh, and by the way, that HOA is expensive. Some of you are already figuring out that a lot of what would be normally baked into the cleaning and maintenance and insurance is actually in the HOA. They take care of the entire exterior of your property as well as the master insurance policy. You're only maintaining and cleaning the inside of a brand new unit. But ask us about it. We can do a call with you on our Proforma. We do show over time increasing maintenance because this is not going to be new forever, right? And that needs to be taken into account. So you can see your operational expenses here. We end up at about a 6.2 cap on this unit, and over in year 10, based on assumptions increasing and expenses increasing over time, you're going to end up at a 7.6. We show projections of selling these at a 5, which is what the market would absorb. It's what it absorbs now. So you'd have a really good solid market value in 10 years, assuming you sold it at a 5 cap with those assumptions holding true. And like I said, historically, and taking a snapshot now, Chase and Sarah would probably agree with me. We don't sell stabilized fourplexes at FIG for anything less than $850 in Utah County right now. Granted, those typically tend to be townhomes, but let me give you some perspective here. We just moved a triplex. I got an email during this webinar, a stabilized triplex in Easton Park, which is one of our bigger developments, for $630,000. That's a triplex, right? So values, we expect them to be pretty strong going forward on that. You probably want to know a little bit about the comparables. So these are just some notes on a complex right next to us in Payson called Eversage. And when I say right next, I mean literally right next. So you can see that on their 2-bedroom units, your square footage, a little over 1,000 square feet, and this thing is about 4 years old now. They get $1,250 to $1,350. I'll unpack what that means for you. $1,350 is a lease that you sign in July. $1,250 is one that you sign in January, right? They got to soften that up a little bit during the slow time of the year, I'm sure. When you go research that online, and we're the same, right? This is kind of a gimmick that property managers do. They advertise a base rent, but they're going to charge income on top of that base rent. You see some of these additional charges over to the right. So if you're analyzing one of our properties or any other property, make sure you take that into account. Chase and I had to take an appraiser to the woodshed a couple weeks ago because he did a comparable on a commercial building for us in Magna, one of the 20 plexes that we did there. And he completely ignored all these other ancillary fees that these complexes were charging. Most notable, you see down there on the bottom right of this slide, if you want to live at the Eversage and have a detached garage, you're going to pay $100 a month. And you're going to have a mandatory media package of $115 to $135 a month. And that's just your internet, access to amenities. Everybody calls it something different. Media, tech, I don't know, development, I don't know. I've heard all kinds of things. And the tenants, they're going to pay all the rest of those fees on top of that. So that $1,250 to $1,350 isn't representative of the entire cost of what a tenant at the Eversage is paying. There are some newer apartments also, probably 5 miles south in Payson on I-15. We haven't looked at those. We felt the Eversage was a lot more comparable for us. Right next door, they've got some 2-bedroom plans. Because if you're going to live in Payson, it's pretty much this or those ones 5 miles south, unless you want to live in something kind of older and more rundown, which is the typical small multifamily in most of Utah County right now, if you're not looking at a FIG deal. So let's button this up. Chase, would you just give us a simple walkthrough? Oh, I got a little bit click happy there. So give us just a simple walkthrough on the timing of this project, specifically when an investor needs to do their $10,000 deposit, their 10%, when construction is starting. Kind of walk through that for us, if you would.
Yeah, when we're talking over the phone with our investors and trying to run through this, we've done our best to make this make sense, but when doing new construction, it can be a little bit tricky with all the moving parts. And so we wanted to come up with a timeline or a graph here that you can look at and understand it. With most of our projects, it's going to be very similar to this as far as anywhere between a 2 to 3 year time period. And the first 3 sections there, I won't go into them in too much depth because they've already happened or they're happening currently. It's the land acquisition, market analysis, and the zoning. That's all done beforehand, but it's something that's very important. And for this project there in Payson, it looks like in 2019, as you can see there, they've already done some of those things. As far as the project launch, that's the 4th one there. That's happened back in November towards the end of the year, right before the holidays. We started to take reservations at that point, which we do have a good handful of people in on the project, and that's what we're currently doing right now. Final plat approval hasn't quite happened yet, but it's right around the corner. So if you're wanting to get into a project and not have to wait very long for plat approval or for construction to begin, it's going to be pretty quick considering our other projects. We've had other projects that we've launched before and that we're currently launching where we start to take reservations, and it's just a long runway where investors are waiting until that plat records and construction begins. And with those 2 things I just talked about, let's talk about the deposits a little bit further.
Great.
When you make a reservation, and that's going to be the next slide on how to make a reservation, so I won't go into depth there, but when you make a reservation, it's a $10,000 deposit. That's what's going to happen. It's refundable up until the plat records, which is going to be end of January, first part of February. Once final plat approval happens, that's when a lot of the developer and ownership's land money goes non-refundable, and we're committed to the property and building this project, and things are moving forward. So at that point, we go back to our investors and we ask for them to come forth and pay 10% of purchase price, and that's when it goes non-refundable at that point. So we're very close to that happening here, which is exciting for us. The next one there is going to be the horizontal development. Like I said, that's not too far away. We just put in when the phases start, and for this project there, it's going to be, or excuse me, let me take a step back. I'm talking about vertical. So horizontal development's more of the infrastructure for the utilities and prepping the ground. So yeah, that's going to be January, February, March, not too far away. And then jumped ahead of myself, but the vertical development begins right after that. We want to make sure all the infrastructure happens beforehand and before we close you on your construction loan, so that we're ready to rock and roll and construction can move a lot faster that way. On that time period there, it just depends on what phase you get into. Construction for this project down in Payson, you're anywhere between April and May. And I'd plan on about a 12-month build period. That's what we tell our investors. Sometimes it can be sooner, but it's always good to plan on that 12-month construction period, just in case if there's any delays with construction, which can happen. Once construction's finished, after that 12-month mark, then it's a simple refinance. If you're getting financing when construction starts, you're taking on a construction loan. When it's finished, it's a simple refinance into that 30-year fixed long-term loan. And that's not expected to happen until 2021. Once that's done, the lease-up period can happen. Lease-up period for us starts right when it's finished. We have Max PM. They're already going to start to market those properties well before it's finished. I'd say anywhere between about 1 to 3 months, just to start to get leads and traffic and get the word out so we get these properties leased up as soon as possible. Also, if I missed anything so far that I need to touch on there?
No, I think that's okay. I'll just add to it that you got your lease up there. I don't think it's going to take that long. It's a 96-store project. It's pretty small by our standards, and the bulk of it is going to be completed during the prime leasing season. So it won't be like when you complete units in late fall and there's a lot of things that happen when units get completed in late fall through the winter, because it's just, you don't have as many people looking to move that time of year, but also landscaping can really be a challenge when you're dealing with that. So you're trying to get fewer people to move into something that doesn't look super desirable. And there are some things that we can do to kind of mask that and work through it. But in the spring, landscaping's coming in, grass is getting green. I don't foresee this thing going through the end of the year. Now, keep in mind, investors, that's not me guaranteeing that that's going to be the case, right? Nobody knows everything there, but that would be my best guess. You want me to do the reservation one, Chase?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. All right. So if you want to do this, some of you are already aware of these steps. You're already kind of engaging with us, and that's fine. Reach out. Let's get the rest of your questions answered. But the first thing you're going to do is going to tell us which one you want. And we can send you the summary of the reservation map, what's still available and such. So you're going to have 3 to 5 business days to make that official. You've got to get your pre-approval done with Lane Aldrich, and you're going to have to get a deposit into Karen Weeks at United West Title. We'll also help you with upgrades and give you some recommendations there. This one comes standard with many of them that we already recommend. I think probably if it were me on this particular project, the only one I would consider above what's already included is granite countertops in the kitchen. Maybe the ceiling fans and can lights. I don't know. What, Sherida, do you have an opinion on that? Chase, do you have an opinion on that?
I like the fans and cans, and I like at least the granite in the kitchen.
Yeah. So you could have that option of adding those as well, and we could get you cost figures on doing that. And I get asked this a lot because our next slide, I think, is questions. So let me just address a question that I know you're going to have. People ask all the time, what upgrades should I do and what kind of return am I going to get on them? Well, we don't know for sure. We do know that everything that we've included standard on this one is not going to put you at any kind of a disadvantage in the initial lease up. That's what we're really looking at here, is when we pump 100 units onto the market over a 90-day period, you can't have 100 people waiting to sign lease applications right then and there. That doesn't happen, right? There is an absorption rate. It takes time to get through those. But by you having the stainless and the good flooring and the blinds, nobody's looking at yours going, I just want to go to the next one. Because we try to lease them out in the order which they are completed. That's not a perfect science, but that's what we try to do. So if you added granite, would your units fill up faster? I'll give you a good firm maybe. And that might give you a better rate of return on your money, because if you have a lower initial vacancy rate, that's good. And will they lease faster down the road? Will people stay longer because it's brighter and they've got ceiling fans? I think there's a case that you could make for that. We do see some gradual separation over time. When you look at some of these projects that we did 5 years ago that are now rented and they're running occupancy rates in the mid to high 90s, the units that have a little bit better upgrade stay vacant for less time. And we kind of start to see a little bit of separation on what you can get for the rent. You might get $25 more, or maybe even 50 in some cases. Some of that can have to do with other things, but that's a big conversation and we're happy to have it with you. So then you'll review and you'll sign your purchase agreement with us. And then you're off and running. When it's time to start construction, Lane will circle back with you, and there's a bunch of details on getting your loan done and your closing that we'll deal with. But that's how you would move forward from this point, and we'll help you take care of the details. The bottom line, we like it. It's located in southern Utah, and that's where the growth is headed. Not southern Utah County. That's where the growth is headed, and it's close to those employment centers that you see. People can live and work in Payson. They can live in Payson and work in the rest of Utah County if they want to, too, as well. There's a lot of options. And it's going to continue to become more accessible for that kind of millennial generation, the people that don't want to use cars. They want to have access to the mass transit. And if any of you ever visited us, or you're going to visit us soon, I would encourage you, come to Utah County. You can see a lot of these front runner stops from the freeway, or you can jump on Google and check it out. Look what's happening. Look what's expanding next to these front runner stops. Right? I remember we did a project in Vineyard called Tucker Row and the Locks. These were done a couple years apart from each other. And it looked kind of like it was in the middle of nowhere by the lake, right? There was nothing going on there when we did it. And we said, there is a front runner stop coming in, because you could see tracks. And people were nervous. They thought, are there going to be coal tracks coming up and down here, coal cars and big old nasty noisy trains? No, it's front runner. And it's an asset. It's an asset because the tenants have close proximity to mass transit to get up and down the Wasatch Front. We're close to all the amenities that you need, right? It's going to be a hands-off, low maintenance investment, right? You've got that builder warranty for the first year where this can get broken in. The maintenance request can be handled through the builder, right? So all those partnerships are in place to give that good handoff. I don't think you're going to find a better cap rate. In fact, I think this beats the cap rate out there by at least a point on the majority of the inventory that's out there. I know this because I just listed another one that's done. This one's up in Heber, and I listed it like a 4 cap, and the phone's ringing. Investors are interested in that. So if you're an investor that's willing to take risk to go through the build process and the stabilization process, you get that cherry on the top. You get some equity out of the chute, most likely. And we're close to the 2 major universities. When school's in session, there's 60,000 kids here. And what does that do for the economy? It's a huge benefit. So we had one question come in through the chat, and then we had a couple that got emailed that you wanted addressed. So the parking, I had a question about parking and how the garage space is going to work. This is going to be similar when it comes to the covered garage space. That is owned and retained by the builder developer team. The garages are, but those are given to Max Property Management to rent out on a first come, first served basis. So you won't have an assigned covered garage in your unit. Now the city is allocating 2.25 spots per unit, one of those covered. So we'll do some covered parking and then some uncovered parking. So you have 2.25 spots per unit typically is what we see here in Utah to answer that question. So that was from Dan, who we had a great lunch a couple months ago back in San Francisco. Thanks again for that, Dan. I'll see you again soon. Then another question that we got emailed in, and we were going to take time for those, but we're almost out of gas here. We'll do this last one, and then please reach out. We'll give you instructions on that. Sherida, what happens if the builder doesn't finish on time? What happens? Are we stuck here? What happens?
No. So what happens is if we go over the 12-month, or the builder goes over the 12-month time frame that's listed in the contract, they will pay you a prorated amount for the 30 days or whatever that amount is over. But for 30 days, it's $500 a door. So for a 4-plex, you're looking at $2,000 for every 30 days that they go over. And that usually comes, it's a little bit delayed, but Brian Schnell, our director of, Director of Operations, is the one that will be sending out those checks.
Okay.
Lots of train of thought there. So yeah, you will be compensated for that, and it is written in the contract.
Chase, how do you handle we've got 100 doors that are going to come online within a 90-day period, right? How do investors know we got this question, that we're not playing favorites, right? That we're not giving them the best units first to our favorite client or whatever, because apparently we have favorite clients.
So it depends on when the C of O, certificate of occupancy, is received. with Max Property Management. And then once they get that building, they'll start to lease up your unit according to when it was received. If you're building number A and you received it for building number B, then they would lease up at least one of your units before building number B, and then they'd go on to the next one.
Right.
However, when a tenant comes in, and they'll be marketing for those tenants, and hopefully they have a good database of potential clients for that, they'll start to show them those properties. They still have the option to go with whatever property that they would like. So that's why we talked about the upgrades a little bit and how that could be a little bit tricky depending on what you decide to put in your unit.
Right. Right. So essentially, out of the units that have obtained C of O, certificate of occupancy, and that could be a quarter of the project, a half of it, it could be all of it. The management is always rotating tenants through, right, to make sure everybody goes around and gets a tenant. And then they come back around again. And then this is out of the available units. So this can kind of ebb and flow, right? Time of year, how many units are getting their C of O. It's a moving target. And I think it's a good way for investors to be prepared. It's a lot like we built an apartment complex, right? We're going to fill them up. And typically we get multiple leases per week, and that's good. But you might not be feeling so good if one of them wasn't your units, right? So call us and talk to us about what the traction is on lease up so you can know, okay, this is leasing up. We're going in the right direction. And we'll tell you all about the marketing that's happening to do that. I would just add, so let's say that you're in that first 25% batch of completed units. The management team is going to bring people to your units, say, hey, this one is available, right? And they try to do that in that round robin method. However, there are some discrimination laws and things that they can't do. If somebody looks at your unit and they don't like it because you ignored our advice on upgrades or something, hint, hint, okay? But if they don't like it, there's nothing that prevents the manager from saying, well, yeah, there's this other one too. Or if they point and they say, well, what about that one over there? That stuff can and does happen. So we try to really do our best to optimize your ability to lease up as quickly as possible. But also remember that at the very beginning of this, the initial improvements, the stabilization cost, if you budget for stabilization, you're going to be fine. You'll be able to carry yourself through that initial lease up period. I think that's all the time we have for questions now. And I wish we could do more, but if you want to reach out and discuss Pineridge Farms or anything else coming up from FIG, right now, we're mopping up some reservations in Laguna Farms in Nampa, Idaho. We're recording this webinar early in 2020. Can't believe it's 2020. But the availability for that is later, I think mid-fall of 2020. So most of that's gone. We have some units still available in the latter phases of Starwood Farms in Cypress, Texas, that should be starting construction within the next 60 to 90 days. So that could be a good 1031 option if you're looking to do something quickly. And so could this one. Pineridge Farms starts in March. So if you've got 1031 exchanges on the brain, this is an excellent project for you to keep in mind. And then, of course, please stay tuned. In the next 2 to 3 weeks, I think we'll launch El Mirage, Arizona, our very first project down there in Arizona. So lots of other options too. We'd love to have you in this one because I think when you look at Payson, Pineridge Farms, and that area with Front Runner and the expansion, in 3 years, you won't even recognize it. It's going to be a completely different place and a lot of people living there and some great cash flow for investors. Enjoy your day, enjoy your weekend, and happy investing.